Let's bring in Frederick T. Davis, lecturer in law at Columbia University. Frederick, thank you for being with us here on France 24. We always appreciate your time. Can we go straight to what these charges mean? We're talking about the Espionage Act. We're talking about national security under threat. We're talking about top secret documents being left in, as we understand it, places that the public could have had access to at Mar-a-Lago. Tell us about these charges. Tell us about the profundity of what we're seeing here.
Well, it's pretty profound, and a number of people have used the word unprecedented. And here we have the former president of the United States accused of these things. If you look at the indictment, which was filed last week, what the prosecutor wants to do is treat this like a straightforward proposition. We have laws relating to confidential documents. If documents are judged to be secret, you can't take them with you. They belong to the government. They do not belong to people in person. You don't show them to other people and use them to your personal advantage. And most of all, you don't respond to official requests by lying and hiding things. And the straightforward proposition the indictment makes is Mr. Trump violated all of those propositions. He had documents that the evidence may show and is alleged to show he knew were secret. It's not like he had them hanging around his house when he got home one night. He took them with him. He picked them out on January 21st, 2021, when he left the White House. These are ones he wanted to keep with him. He was given a formal request by the archives to whom these documents belong. There's an authority of the archives. These are their documents, not his, saying, we want you to return all the documents you have, which he did not do. And instead, there apparently is evidence that he took them out and showed to his buddies around the table at his sports club, saying, look at this, here's some secret stuff. And then, again, the allegations are that he systematically worked with lawyers and others to try to hide the documents, in part by moving them from room to room, and in part by trying to get people to downplay, if not entirely mislead, the investigator.
Fred, if I can pause you there for a second, it sounds incredibly, the way we're talking about it, it almost makes it sound, and this isn't any fault of how you're expressing it, it's the actual situation. It makes it sound incredibly childish of Trump in the way he's behaved. But let's, just for the viewers, flesh out what you're saying there, Frederick, about these charges. July 2021, at Bempton, New Jersey, at the golf club you're talking about, revealing plans for an attack on Iran to his guests. August 2021, same place, Bedminster, revealing a top-secret map of the ongoing withdrawal from Afghanistan. That's August 2021. Of course, that was just before the pullout actually happened. And again, May 2022, what you were talking about there, the obstruction that took place at Mar-a-Lago, documents eventually, being found in, among other places, a bathroom. It's the sense that this has been basically a man playing with the system to the very nth degree.
Yeah, but that appears to be quite consistent with other things he's done. Look, I make no pretense of being particularly objective at this. The man is an obsessive narcissist. He really is. And I think he views all of this as not about the safety of our people in uniform in Iran and Afghanistan, and not about following the rules of government, but about himself. It is really quite extraordinary, in my opinion.
Frederick, bear with us, please. I'll bring in Angela Diffley, our international affairs editor, from on this one. We're hearing there from a man with great legal insight, as Frederick T. Davis has, as to how this could pan out. And clearly the seriousness of what we're seeing here is huge. But nonetheless, one imagines that, and there's probably a group of them down there that we can see, a small group, but I imagine there are more to come. Trump supporters will not be swayed in any way, shape or form.
There is a very, very sizable hardcore of Trump supporters who, as you say, will not be swayed. And interestingly, on Saturday at a rally, the defeated Republican candidate for the governorship of Arizona, Carrie Laker, she reminded everybody that Trump supporters, a very large number of them, own guns and are card-carrying members of the National Rifle Association. She then went on to say, this is not a threat, it is a public service announcement. These are astonishing comments to make. And there is this rather worrying undertone We all know what happened on January the 6th. There is a level of anger which, on both sides, which is very disturbing, and everybody is aware that coded messages or careless talk could lead to something very, very dangerous. As to whether, apart from that core of supporters, Trump will endear himself to other people throughout this business and the trial which is to be expected, I think very many Republican voters might balk at the idea that American lives were put at risk, perhaps, that this man might be sitting in the White House again, even though a recent poll apparently showed that 76% of Republican sympathizers are more worried by what they say is a weaponized Justice Department than by the fact that these documents might have been in the wrong place or in the wrong hands. But I'm not sure that will continue to be the case as this unfolds.
Angela, thank you. Frederick T. Davis, I hope you were able to hear what Angela said there. Can I come back to you to talk about the steps that we go to from here? Because clearly this is the start of a process. Trump arraigned, now officially charged, now back on license. Of course, he's not deemed to be a flight risk, so he's allowed to go free, but obviously free under the parameters of the law. Where do we go from here? How long will this process last? And of course, after that, we're thinking, what impact would that have on any Trump campaign for president?
Well, in terms of how long it lasts, the only honest answer is no one knows. Normally, a case like this could come to trial, and in my opinion, should come to trial in about a year. It could be faster than that under certain circumstances if the judge pushes it along. All of Trump's strategic impulses and instincts are to delay it as much as he can. He's done that in every single litigation he's been in. So I suspect that they will try to put it off and put it off. And then he will claim, not without justice, look, this is interfering with a solemn event, namely the election of the next president of the United States. So there are a number of steps it'll go through that are procedurally normal, and he will try to prolong them, exacerbate them, make them as complicated as possible, and of course, fight what for him is the real battle, which is the battle outside of court.
Indeed. And of course, this is his second visit in recent months to a courtroom, is it not? In April, he pled not guilty to state charges in New York, stemming from hush money payment to a porn star, Stormy Daniels. I asked you about this case a couple of nights ago. You said to me it was a lot less serious than what Trump is facing now.
The indictment in New York is a little odd, and it has to do with New York state law dealing with business records that is not totally lacking in seriousness. I think I have problems with that prosecution. This one here, look, I've known Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, for some 30 years, not well, but I admire him. I've worked very closely with Jack Smith, the special prosecutor. These are very serious, and in the case of Merrick Garland, very cautious people who have really gone about this very, 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 very carefully. So these are very important charges. So far, at least, they've been extremely well framed and presented. So far, Trump's record is not doing very well, if anything at all, in terms of responding on the merits. And there was a civil case against him by Jean Carroll, who accused him of sexual excesses and rape. And he basically had no defense on the merits. His entire approach was to try to attack her and destabilize the process. And that's in large part what he's likely to do here. So these are serious. Look, think of voters who have children or spouses, in the military.
Frederick, I need to pause you. Trump may be about to speak. Excuse me. Let's listen to Trump.
You want the best? Keep fighting, sir. Oh my God. Great champ. Just don't fight him.
I mistimed that one. Donald Trump just joshing with his supporters. Frederick T. Davis, I apologize for interrupting you. Could you please take up where you left off?
No, but he has not ever shown a strongly competent ability to respond on the merits of the various charges against him. I'm talking about going back 10 years. I mean, he was sued over Trump University for fraud. He settled for $25 million. His company was charged criminally. It was convicted, and his defense didn't amount to too much. What he tends to do is not even deign to engage on what happened on the merits, but try to attack the system, attack the prosecutors, attack the witnesses. Everybody is out to get him. And that may work to some degree politically. That's kind of not my area. What I think the Jean Carroll case shows is if you have a judge who keeps his or her eye on moving things forward and actually hold him down to a trial. Here we have a trial, Mr. Trump. You've been accused. You're entitled to presumption of innocence. You can defend yourself. He does not do very well.
Frederick T. Davis, thank you for the moment, very much indeed. Angela, quick word with you before we go back to Kedevan in Miami. This then clearly is a situation where it's not enough for Trump to stand there and shout fake news.
No, he's
clearly not.
He's going to face a trial. At best, he can delay it. It will, at best, for him, distract him. Well, I suppose possibly he could use it as a platform to talk about how he's a victim.
Because that cool fake news always taps into his base, doesn't it?
But it
Excuse
might
me one
not
second.
widen his...
Trump is now speaking. Let's take that.
And we can't let it happen. I'm going to make a little speech tonight in Bedminster, and I hope you're going to be there.
Can you start tomorrow?
I hope you're going to be there. You can come too if you want, okay?
Start tomorrow, sir.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
God bless Donald Trump.
Thank you, everybody.
The speech later, Angela. I'm sorry I cut you off. The point I was asking you to develop was this idea that Trump would normally stand there and shout, "This is all fake news." Now, this is really a time where he needs to stand up and be counted. He needs to face the real questions from the real legal system.
Yeah, and they are very, very significant charges about very, very serious issues. And anybody now will be able to read them and work out for themselves that this isn't nothing. And I think that it is unlikely. I know there are some people saying that his support will only grow. Perhaps it won't shrink. But it seems astonishing that more and more people would think this man is worth voting for. I think it's a big setback. It is interesting to note there aren't that many supporters there in Miami, in the hundreds. Even the police chief was saying we're ready for 5,000 or 50,000. It seems they were in the hundreds. They might all be instead in New Jersey waiting for the speech tonight. We'll see.
Angela Diffley, thank you very much indeed. Kedevan Gorgestani waiting for us in Miami. Kedevan, of course, was there when Trump arrived and there when he left the courthouse. Kedevan, I don't know what the situation is where you are now. Please fill us in. Trump supporters everywhere. How's security?
Well, the supporters and the protesters are slowly clearing out. It seems there's still quite a small crowd. It really in front of the building, just behind me. People with flag, mostly Trump supporters who have been there really all throughout the day. But the really big crowds were really at the moment when he arrives and when he was in the building. But it seems that when they heard that he had already left, that started the process of clearing this out. As far as security goes, well, the Miami police had said it. This was their plan all along. They were ready for anything, but they were hoping that nothing would happen. And it seems that they were, at least up till now, right. They had not put any barricades in around the courthouse. You can see behind me this yellow tape, the police line. That's basically the only barrier to get to the courthouse that was installed by the Miami police. That said, there was a heavy police presence, police cars, police officers patrolling, helicopters above head. So they were really hovering around, being here in case something happened. But they had planned for all contingencies, and it seemed that the message to these protesters to really express their First Amendment right in peace was actually heard. And as far as I can see, and so far, it was really exchange of words, people yelling at each other, people saying bad things about Trump, people saying good things about Trump, but no serious incidents to talk to right here from the Miami courthouse. As you said, there are likely going to be a lot of supporters also in New Jersey and Bedminster when he'll be making that speech. So the crowds of Donald Trump supporters pretty much split around Florida, around this courthouse, around his other resort, as well as his resort in New Jersey, waiting to hear from Donald Trump.
Kedvan, we heard earlier from Frederick T. Davis, who's still with us, about the serious nature of these charges. And I think someone facing charges under the Espionage Act, it doesn't really get any worse than that, I don't think. Well, obviously, we could go worse, I suppose, if it was murder. But there you go. The Espionage Act is probably as difficult a situation as any ex-president can find himself in. I'm wondering, Kedvan, where you operate normally in Washington, what are the whispers that you pick up in the corridors of power about this case?
Well, it's interesting to see how the Republicans have been dealing with this indictment. A lot of them waited until the actual charges were unveiled to really express themselves on the matter. And you really have two sort of sides. One side that is fully supportive of Donald Trump. They have been attacking the Department of Justice, calling it a witch hunt, really using the rhetoric of Donald Trump that he is a victim of a political witch hunt. And you've seen this whether it is in Congress or even amongst some of the 2024 Republican candidates. Ron DeSantis, for example, really staying clear a little bit from the details of the indictment, but really focusing his attacks on the Department of Justice. But there are other Republicans who have been critical of Donald Trump, who have said that these are actually serious charges, especially the fact that he mishandled and retained those classified documents that have to do with U.S. national security. That's something that Nikki Haley, for example, who is also running for the GOP nomination, she said that this was very serious and that he potentially jeopardized U.S. national security. We heard from other Republicans saying that these were really serious allegations, that if the information in this indictment turns out to be true, that he showed some of the vulnerabilities of the United States to other people, that he talked about some of the U.S.'s attack plans on foreign nations to people without any classified that shouldn't be reading those classified documents, that could be very tricky for him. So you're also seeing some Republicans, very few, but Chris Christie, who is running for the 2024 nomination, he has come out full force against Donald Trump, and Asa Hutchinson, another candidate, saying even before the charges were unveiled that Donald Trump should be dropping out of the race because at best this would be a distraction, but at worst, it would be much more serious.
Kedvan, for now, thank you very much indeed. Kedvan Gorgestani, our Washington correspondent who is in Miami where Donald Trump has been arraigned. He's entered a not guilty plea. That was via the voice of his lawyer. Trump didn't speak in court. And his valet, Walt Nota, is also charged as a co-conspirator with him. He too has entered a not guilty plea. Here in the studio we have Angela Diffley, our International Affairs editor, and we have joining us via Skype Frederick T. Davis, lecturer in law at Columbia University. Frederick, can I come to you next? This whole case for you, what is it saying about the US? Kedvan there saying that perhaps this has exposed some weaknesses in the system. That's something that maybe some Trump supporters may be trying to sort of, I don't know, use as some kind of mitigation in his favor in another way. But other Republicans actually turning on Trump now.
Well, clearly the whole event, I mean, Trump as a phenomenon has exposed extraordinary fissures in our society that we were sort of aware of, but we didn't know it was this bad. I mean, some of the statistics we've been talking about, that here's a man faced with putting our soldiers' lives in danger, and yet 76% of his party think that it's politically motivated. You know, that's a degree of polarization, it was unheard of a generation ago. In terms of the federal criminal legal justice system, which is the one I know and practice in, so far, I think it's doing its job. I mean, they've gone about it in a methodical way. They've been very, very careful. They've gone to court. They by and large have won. I am very hopeful that the criminal justice system will hold together, that a judge will be neutral, give him every presumption of innocence to which he's entitled, which is total, and that we'll get a fair trial. If we can do that, look, I'm a lawyer. I can't speak for the entire country, but I would like to say that our legal system is up for this challenge.
Frederick T. Davis, we always appreciate your honesty, and your honesty is shining through on this one. Your analysis is balanced. We're not getting any sense of anybody is taking a side. And clearly what you're saying now is that these charges are possibly as serious as any president. Well, this is unprecedented stuff, definitely.
Absolutely, it's unprecedented. But don't forget, there are other charges out there. It appears likely that the state prosecutor in Georgia will bring charges relating to election fraud that will be, I couldn't even hazard a guess whether you call that more serious or less serious. I mean, the notion of interfering with an election to try to have a state that clearly voted for Biden somehow come out and say, no, we really voted for Trump. That's pretty serious, too, I would. And then there's the whole issue of January 6th. A person who supported Trump was sentenced to 18 years in prison for seditious conspiracy, when what he was doing was what he said was following what he believed was the orders of Trump. So we have not gotten to the end of this. This is a very important step, but it is only a partial step. We got a long way to go.
Fred, sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
I was just going to pick up on a couple of things you said there. The Georgia case, which is likely to come up, of course, it will emerge whether or not Trump was guilty or not guilty. But you can see what he had to gain from that if he were to do it, if he was leaning on Georgia to overturn the results so that he won in that state. You can see
there was a means to an end.
Yes,
yeah.
this
one,
document,
it's hard to see, isn't it?
One wonders what he was going to do, what was his intent. And it is very worrying. There are a number of very worrying possibilities. Or was it something, whatever it was, it's such a curious situation. He didn't need to find himself indicted today. Why did he take those documents, and why did he not give them back?
So was he being a brash show-off, or did he have a more insidious intent? That's the question. Do you have a theory on that one? Should we ask Frederick if he has a theory on that one? Frederick T. Davis, was Trump showing off when he stashed the documents, or did he have a more dark meaning or dark aim? What do you think?
With him, they merge into each other. I somewhat extravagantly used the word obsessive narcissist before, but I think it's clinically descriptive. And I just think he views everything around him as something that is there to help him. He saw these documents. He had this love affair with the dictator of North Korea, and he thought, wouldn't that be cool to have those documents? And, he knows that he has issues with Biden about Afghanistan. Wouldn't it be great to have those documents? And I think in his world, the notion that there are rules saying, no, you shouldn't do that, that's just not on his level of understanding.
I mean, there's a whole, you talk about his world, his universe. I mean, there have been publications. I'm not sort of inventing this. These are things that have been studied, published, and there's been no legal action taken against the authors. So we can go with perhaps an element of veracity in what's been said about Trump's links to Russia, for instance, and certain links with people who may have connections to the former, or maybe it still even exists, KGB, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think he doesn't respect limits. I mean, I think he thinks, why not try? And look, he has systematically done that around the world in terms of his, relationships with Russia, where he's fundamentally changed, foreign policy for reasons that are hard to understand. So there's just, I think we see a consistent pattern there of, sort of making his point that I'm different. I don't fall into this majority of people who docilely go along and follow rules. I speak out. And then, as we've already discussed several times, there's a significant, although still minority, group of the population that reacts to that in a positive way. So it's not going to go away.
Indeed. Frederick, thank you for the moment. Please stay with us if you can. People are joining us by the moment, of course, and we'll give everybody a roundup in a couple of moments' time, just to bring everybody really up to the pace of what is going on, because it is fast-moving here. Angela Diffley, I'm pleased to say, our International Affairs Editor, is with us here in the studio to give us another level of context on this story. Donald Trump here on one level, is a candidate for the Republican Party to be re-elected, he hopes, as president. Then on the other side of the story, this unprecedented legal case facing these 37 federal charges. I mean, you couldn't make this up, could you? It's a remarkable story.
And others further down the line, the Georgia case, which is likely to come up, which again is very serious. And he is likely to be on trial. If he were elected president, he could face trial while he was president. He could be jailed while he was president. These scenarios are crazy. And I would imagine there would be a significant number of Americans who think we do not want that in our country. We are the leader of the free world. This is not a good look, at the very least. But, you know, we'll see. What needs to happen if Trump is not to get the Republican nomination is that the field needs to narrow. There are a lot of candidates at the moment. If this starts to look really serious, if he looks like a dangerous candidate who, if he wins the nomination, will not win the US election, then the Republicans really need to get their act together. They need some candidates need to stand down. They need to narrow the field so that there is a significant opposition to Trump and so that somebody else gets the nomination if they feel it's looking really bad and if they feel he might win the nomination but go on to lose the presidency. So we'll have to watch as spectators and see how that happens. And the people who hold this in their hands are the 12 jurors in Florida who are ordinary people who will be chosen to make a momentous decision at the end of this trial. And they hold a very significant amount of power in their hands. It needs to be a unanimous verdict. And also, of course, the voters for the United States.
Indeed. Angela, bear with us, please. We're looking at images of Donald Trump's vehicle in the motorcade there, just leaving the freeway. Interesting word, isn't it, when you consider the situation. He's been arraigned on trial. He's charged with 37 federal charges, which is unprecedented. Again, that word again in connection with Donald Trump. This is history in the making. The first time that a former US president has been charged with such grave and serious charges under the Espionage Act. Let's go to Kedevan Gorgestani. Kedevan's been watching the situation in Miami. Kedevan, could you give us an upsum about what has happened for the viewers who are just joining us right now? Could you bring them all up to date with the situation, please? Give us a sense of what's been going on and what has happened where you are.
Well, Donald Trump arrived here at the Miami courthouse a little bit before 2 p.m. He was processed. He was booked at 2:05 p.m. That processing part was officially over, and then he appeared in that courtroom where his lawyer on his behalf pleaded not guilty for Donald Trump. Donald Trump was read the 37 counts of the charges he's facing. He was then told by the magistrate, given some conditions as to how he was going to be leaving this courthouse, the magistrate telling Donald Trump that he was not to discuss the facts of this case with any witnesses or his co-defendant, Walt Nauta, who's one of his aides. The magistrate being very clear about that if he had to discuss some facts of this case with any witnesses or with Walt Nauta, he had to go through his legal team. Only the lawyers can discuss this. So that was very clear from the magistrate. And then Donald Trump, as expected, was released from this Miami courthouse as a free man. And we saw him addressing some of his supporters. He's now headed to New Jersey, back to New Jersey at Bedminster, one of his many resorts where he is set to deliver a speech around 8:15 p.m. Local time. That's 2:15 a.m. In Paris. Once again, just like he did after the arraignment in Manhattan, he wants to speak to his supporters. He wants to discuss this case. He will likely address some elements of this arraignment, though if it is anything like the speech that we heard from him back at Mar-a-Lago a couple of months ago, he is likely just to repeat some of the things that he's been saying for the past few weeks, which is that this is a political witch hunt, that this is an attack on a political rival, that this is yet another example of the weaponization of the Department of Justice.
Kedevan, thank you very much indeed. Kedevan Gorgeous-Stardy there in Miami. And it's worth pointing out that Donald Trump making his way back to Bedminster, New Jersey, as Kedevan was just mentioning, that is actually the golf club where this all began. This very story, Angela, all kicked off with those revelations that Donald Trump had been bigging it up in his own golf course, saying, hey, look what I've got, to his friends. One can't begin to imagine what was going on in his mind.
One can't, no. And that's what makes it really very different from the Mike Pence thing, from the Joe Biden thing. Documents found on their premises, in Joe Biden's case, in his garage, again, in New Jersey, or Delaware. And in Washington, in offices in Washington that he no longer used.
Yes.
But he said, look, I'm sorry, I didn't know, go and get them. I think the FBI found them anyway. The same with Mike Pence. I'm sorry, I didn't know. No attempt on either side to obstruct the FBI or any subsequent inquiries. A special counsel has been appointed to look into why those documents were on Joe Biden's property. Again, a small number of boxes. It really isn't of the same magnitude. And what really distinguishes the Trump case is what looks like an operation to obstruct the FBI and the subsequent investigation. There are tapes, there are...
I think this is something that, because you can talk about, legal systems are different, those kind of things, but I think everybody the world over understands that if you obstruct the police whilst they're trying to do their duty, on whatever level, you're in the wrong. And it's probably as in the wrong as you could be, isn't it?
Well, all of this will emerge in the trial.
That's the correct answer.
Allegations, we'll see if they're backed up or not, whatever.
Indeed, it's a remarkable case, Angela. Thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in Frederick T. Davis, lecturer in law at Columbia University. You know the people involved in the prosecution. You know the people involved in the investigation. You've spoken of your admiration for Merrick Garland, for instance. Where do we go from here in terms of this going forward? I presume at some point we're going to see Donald Trump giving evidence, taking questions, being cross-examined.
Well, yes and no. I mean, there will be a trial. There's no way that he will be heard under oath between now and the trial. That's not part of the federal criminal procedure. He will have a trial at which he can and should attend. Don't forget, he did not attend the civil trial with Jean Carroll, but he should be there. And then he can or may not testify on his own behalf. It would be hard to imagine a juror being very impressed with any argument in his favor if he's sitting there and does not testify. So I think that as a practical matter, we will hear from him, but not until trial.
The merits of the jury system is that it is what it is. Obviously, it's being judged by one's peers, but one's peers may have political points of view. Is it possible the jury could have to be vetted in some way?
Well, they will be vetted, and it's a complex process. And one of the big issues before the judge will be how she runs that vetting process. I'll say one thing is the obstruction of justice elements here, the counts, change things a bit from a jury perspective. I've tried a lot of jury trials, criminal jury trials in this country. Jurors really don't like obstruction of justice. If they hear that someone is accused of something, they'll listen to that evidence. They may or may not be impressed by it. But if they hear that that person reached out and tried to get people to lie or to get rid of documents and stuff, that tends to motivate jurors in a way very adverse to the defendant. So I think that is an issue that has both legal significance in the sense of being a distinct criminal charge, but also kind of a dynamic change in how the trial may unroll.
Angela was pointing that out, that the sense that that would work in that way, the way that people might look at it in a very different way, given the obstruction element to this. But in terms of going forward, in terms of the duration of this whole thing, earlier you mentioned it seemed almost open-ended. Can it really drag on that long?
Well, he will try to, one thing that Trump does, he tries to appeal everything that he loses, and that's actually quite hard in a federal criminal process, that you don't get an appeal of adverse decisions. but he will do his best. And it takes a while. I mean, there are issues in terms of his access to all of the information that the government has. There are issues in terms of how the trial will be run. It takes a while. As I said earlier, a norm might be something in the order of magnitude of a year. I think a very experienced and careful judge could move that along faster. But there are any number of criminal cases that take longer than that. It just does.
How much is all this going to cost, Frederick? What can you put a ballpark figure on sort of what kind of amount of money might be spent in kind of taking this case forward?
Spent by Trump in defense costs?
I'm thinking of the whole thing, defense costs, the prosecution, the whole bundle.
Well, that's a good question. It's hard to know the budgeting within the Department of Justice, how they allocate. I'll give you an order of magnitude. There was a white-collar financial case a few years ago that I actually wrote about, where we know what the costs were for the defense counsel because the defendant tried to get it back from his company. And one individual going to one trial ran up legal bills of $34 million. And when I lecture on that in Europe, people say, how could you possibly run up that amount of cost just to defend one guy? It'll end up, we're talking tens of millions here.
It is an absolutely, on every level, a remarkable case. And at the center of it, this idea, Frederick, that somehow the system is being corrupted. This is one of, I think, possibly the saddest element, this idea that the whole thing is being somehow twisted and manipulated.
Well, that's what's at stake, and that's why I am passionately hoping that these people, who I don't know terribly well, but whom I deeply admire, our Attorney General and the Special Counsel, I hope that they continue to go at this methodically, fairly, and in a transparent way. A lot depends on this case going ahead and reaching a result that is transparent and understandable and that the world can accept.
Frederick, bear with us, please. Angela, tell us what we're seeing on the screen. An aircraft.
He's heading off. It looks like to New Jersey then for his.
That's it. That's the
in
Trump
his
jet.
Trump plane. Yeah.
So 34 million to defend himself mightn't be too tall an order for Trump, but if we're to believe what he says he's worth, there we go. But
there he is, heading off to New Jersey. Interesting. We were just being told there about the very straightforwardness of the procedure. Trump has been calling the special counsel on social media, even on his way to this courthouse today. He was on social media, on his own Truth Social, talking about how the special counsel was deranged, how he was, I think he used the word terrorist. These very, as we're being told, very, very straightforward, very procedural people trying to stick to the correct way of doing things are under considerable stress and pressure and subject to very strong invective criticism from the outside. So it's a tough job. Anyway, he's heading off to New Jersey, and it will be very interesting to hear what he says in New Jersey, how combative he is.
You've preempted my next question to you. What do you think he'll be telling his supporters? I think we've got a good idea what it might be, but give us a sense of what you feel he might be...
We have never seen him anything other than combative in these situations. He will no doubt say that the Department of Justice has been weaponized, that the special counsel is deranged, as he's just said. He will no doubt portray himself as a martyr, a victim, and perhaps trying to galvanize his core base. We'll see later on.
Angela Diffley, our international affairs editor, thank you much indeed. Final word in this segment from Frederick T. Davis, lecturer in law at Columbia. Fred, we're seeing Trump getting on his jet. He's going to New Jersey. What happens from here?
Well, he goes home and as Angela told you, he'll speak to his reporters. That'll be interesting. He will act through his attorneys. There's one scenario, we don't really know who his attorneys are. I don't think he's likely to appear in Miami again until there's a trial. So what we hear from him personally will be what he says on social media and what he tries to do to destabilize the process. I think the real action now will be his lawyers, and we don't really know who that team is yet, against the Department of Justice lawyers. And there'll be a lot of fascinating detail. This is stuff that I dream about in terms of intellectual interest. So we'll see what happens. But it'll roll out, and like I said, a year is a frame of reference that might be accurate. It might be longer or shorter.
Frederick T. Davis, lecturer in law at Columbia, thank you very much indeed for your insight and analysis. Thanks to Angela Diffley, our International Affairs editor, for your insight too. And thank you to Keravan Gorjistani, watching all developments for us there at the trial in Miami. Thanks to you for watching too. Do stay with us, more to come live from Paris.